Captions in English, please. So this is the fourth video of chapter 3, and it's on properties of matter. So let's start the recording with a video from YouTube.
Physical properties of matter include melting point, boiling point, color, density, magnetism, crystalline shape, malleability, ductility, luster, and refractive index. The physical properties of matter can be observed without any change in the matter's chemical composition. Chemical properties, on the other hand, can be observed only when matter undergoes a chemical change. Here are some examples of chemical properties. Hydrogen peroxide decomposes easily into oxygen gas and water. Iron reacts with oxygen to form iron oxide. Sodium metal reacts with water to give off hydrogen gas. Sodium hydrogen carbonate, baking soda, reacts with acid to give off carbon dioxide gas. Lead nitrate reacts with potassium iodide to form a yellow precipitate of lead iodide. Red phosphorus can undergo combustion in air.
So this is the fourth video of chapter 3 on properties of matter. So properties are the characteristics we use to distinguish one substance from another. There are the physical properties and the chemical properties. So the physical properties are the characteristics of matter that can be changed without changing its composition. It's the characteristics that are directly observable. So once you are through observing that physical property, you still have the same substance from the beginning to the end. So it doesn't change your substance. Chemical properties, on the other hand, are characteristics that determine how the composition of matter changes as a result of contact with other matter or the influence of energy. So it's characteristics that describe the behavior of matter. So and when you go through observing a chemical property, typically you will not have the substance you started with at the end. So let's look at examples of physical properties. So all those properties, just looking at the sample, so odor, taste, well, this you have to smell and taste. The color, the appearance, the shape, the magnetism, as we saw with the iron, solubility, so the fact that you can dissolve it into a liquid. It's a physical property because you can retrieve the substance if you evaporate the water. For example, let's say you're dissolving salt or sugar in water. If you evaporate the water, you will get back your salt or sugar. It will crystallize back. Density, which is the property that describes the mass per unit of volume. the changes of state. So for example, boiling point, melting point, dry ice. Here is the subliming. So that's a physical property, the sublimation. Copper here is ductile. It's been poured into a tube, a thin pipe or tube. The gold leaf here is malleable. You can, fold it, hammer it, put it into a different shape physically. And so all these properties are properties that will not change the nature of the substance you're observing. Chemical properties, on the other hand, to observe a chemical property after the property, after you observe that it's not the same substance anymore. So for example, when iron is rusting, so it's due to corrosion, iron was just iron atoms first, and then when it's rusting, it's becoming iron oxide. So it's not the element iron anymore, now it's a compound made of iron and oxygen. So corrosiveness is an example of chemical property. Flammability, like the example shown, but with that tanker truck on fire. The truck was carrying something flammable, for example, gasoline or hydrogen, like we saw with the Hindenburg. Any substance that is flammable, so many organic solvents or some gases are flammable, and so just a spark will trigger the combustion of that substance, and so that means it's flammable. So those are dangerous properties. The acidity of substance or basicity, the toxicity, the reactivity with any kind of matter, or any kind of reactivity basically is a chemical property. So let's apply this concept and check that you understand by indicating whether the following would be considered chemical or physical properties. So the tendency of copper to turn green when exposed to air. So please pause the video before you watch the answer so that you try this on your own to have a better learning experience. So tendency of copper to turn green when exposed to air, that's a chemical property because copper is not supposed to be green. Copper is a reflective red metal, and if it turns green, then it's not copper anymore. It's a different substance, and it's due to corrosion by sulfur in the air, and it turns to what we call a verdigris. So it's a different composition, different substance afterwards. The tendency of automobile paint to dull over time. So if the paint dulls over time, it's because it starts to degrade. It's not the sun typically with the UV lights break down atoms, and so you see degradation. So it's due to the paint becoming different molecules, and so not being shiny anymore. So that's describing a chemical property. Tendency of gasoline to evaporate quickly when spilled on the ground. So when gasoline evaporates, it's still gasoline, but from a liquid it went into a vapor. And so that's a physical property, right? If you would be able to decrease the temperature around, you may be able to condensate gasoline into liquid again. but before and after the evaporation, it's still the same molecule. So that's a physical property. Low mass of aluminum compared to other substances. So aluminum is a metal, but it's a very light metal compared to other metals, for example. And that's a property of low density. You just need to put a piece of aluminum on a balance and get its volume to calculate the density. And so you can see that it's not something that will change aluminum into something else. So that's a physical property. It's the fact that for a given volume, the mass of a sample of aluminum is less, there's less mass than for, let's say, iron or lead or other metals.